Hey guys, well, it is time for another story, and I done my research and I found, well, this has been a subject that I've been interested in since I was decently young. As I told you before, I'm the kind of person that when I catch hold of something, I dig. I dig until I find more information about it, and this is no exception to the rule. So, when I was a child, Mom had an album of Jan and Dean. And on that album was Dead Man's Curve. That song, even today, over 30 years later, even today, somewhat haunts me. Because it tells the story of two people racing, and there's a specific curve in the road where they're racing, and it's called Dead Man's Curve because it'd been guilty of taking a lot of people's lives because it's hard to hit. It's hard to take it. And in the drag race, the one person loses control of his vehicle. Now, Jan wrote that song with another writer, and it happened that the song was based on the kind of car he drove and that other writer drove. And often they would drag race in those two vehicles that's mentioned in the song. And so they used those two cars as the character cars in the song. And the curve specifically that they chose was bad for causing accidents because it's very hard to take, very difficult to take. So let's go on ahead and get into the story before I give it all away. Jan and Dean was a singing duo back in the 60s. Now, before they started, in the 50s, Jan had another partner who was called Arnie. And so their band started as Jan and Arnie walked out. And then in the 60s, Jan continued, and his friend Dean worked with him. Their songs involved surfing, and then later they went on to start singing songs about racing. And Jan's full name was William Jan Barry, and he was born in 1941. Dean's name was Dean Ormsby Torrance. He was born in 1940. Now, to my knowledge, Dean is still alive, but we'll get into that a little later. So Jan more or less was the brain of the duo. He was the one who would do the songwriting, the editing. He was the one that was like in control. And on occasion, though, he would work with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. So some of the songs that Jan and Dean sung was something similar that you would hear the Beach Boys sing. But they never actually more or less sung together, you know. They would work together sometimes, but they were still completely a separate group. And so besides music, it also happened that Jan was in med school. He was wanting to be a doctor. And so he had that going for him. Jan and Dean was producing albums, and some of their music was hitting the top numbers in the charts. And they was really starting to make a name for themselves. And in 1966, in April of 1966, Jan got a notice saying that he was being drafted into the service. And he didn't want to be in the service. He wanted to pursue his career of being a doctor. He wanted to continue training in the medical field. And he thought that he would have that deferment that he was wanting because of him being a med student. But the draft board insisted for him to be in the Army. And it also happened that he had decided to make a deal where he would become his own recording company. So after confronting the draft board about him being drafted, he got upset about it and he left. And he was actually on his way to take care of business to be able to start doing his own recordings, to become his own recording company. And he was driving a Corvette Stingray, just a simple two-seater. And he was averaging about 60 miles an hour. And going around other vehicles and stuff. He supposedly, according to the police, one of his wheels came off of his Corvette, causing him to lose control, hit the curb, and rear end a parked truck. Whether or not the wheel came off, I don't know. All I know is he crashed into the rear of that truck. Totally demolished the Stingray. When the paramedics arrived, they thought he was dead. His skull had been split open, but they found that he was still breathing, so they rushed him to UCLA. And they'd done immediate brain surgery on him to correct the problems. He was in a coma for around 3 months. And when he came to, he was paralyzed on his right side, couldn't speak, couldn't walk, couldn't do anything for himself. Jan was 25 years old when he had this accident. So he had to take a few years of rehab, learning how to talk again and how to use his right hand. They taught him how to walk, but he walked with difficulty, and he still didn't have any use with his right hand, with his right arm and hand. In time, when he had recovered long enough, mentally recovered enough, he realized he still wanted to produce music and sing. So he asked for Dean to help him. And so Dean stayed by his side. Now, before Dean got involved once again with Jan, supposedly Jan had started touring again, but he was with somebody else, and people was kind of confused, thinking that it was Dean, and it wasn't. And so more or less they was saying that Jan and Dean was on the road, but it wasn't Dean himself. So finally, in time, Dean Torrance got back with Jan, and they started working together again. And now, before the accident, they really didn't do tours. They'd done locals. But after the accident, when Jan was capable, they started taking tours. And a lot of times, if the Beach Boys was having a show, you would see Jan and Dean. And Jan and Dean, more or less, would kind of help open the Beach Boys show with a song of their own. Now, mind you, Jan couldn't quite sing like he used to because he still struggled to talk. He was able to talk to you, but some words were like gone out of his vocabulary because he couldn't remember them. And so his talk was slow. But nonetheless, he would sing. And I got to watch a specific video where they did an interview with Jan and Dean. And after the interview, it went on to show them do a performance. And Jan came onto the stage. And he was slow. He had trouble walking. So they kind of helped him up, helped him on stage. And he acted like an excited little boy. They sang their song, And then he would turn around to the drummer. And when you know how that basically a song, a lot of times, especially in the older days, when they would end a song, would be with the drummer hitting the cymbal. And I watched, and in a childlike behavior, Jan would motion for the drummer to do his cymbal, and then they would repeat the last few words, and Jan would motion for him to hit the cymbal again. And they'd done that so many rounds. They would sing the last few words, and Jan once again motioning for that cymbal to be hit. And he was like a child about that. Like, that was exciting to him. But Jan was the kind of person who loved his fans. Sorry about that. He lavished in his fans. So Dean had gotten into doing graphic art for albums. And so that was kind of his sideline. Basically, he done album covers, the arts of the album covers. And then, of course, him being there for Jan and helping him, going on tours with him and stuff. And later, Dean wrote a book about their singing career, Jan's accident, and what life was like afterwards. To my knowledge, Dean is still alive. I've not found anywhere listed where he has died as of yet. But in 2004, at the age of 62, Jan died from complications of a seizure. After the accident, Jan suffered he continuously had difficulties from that accident, physical difficulties, suffering different things from that accident. And the really crazy thing is the song Dead Man's Curve in some ways was kind of like a prophecy, so to speak, or at least how people puts it, because it was 2 years after the release of the song. Jan was in that accident. Now, he didn't have the accident in the so-called Dead Man's Curve that he spoke about in the song, but nonetheless it was in an area that likewise would be hard to take if at a certain speed. So it's a wonder that it didn't kill him. I looked at the pictures, like, of Jan's car, and I looked at James Dean's car. Now, anybody who doesn't know, James Dean was a very young actor, played only in 3 movies, and was killed in a car accident. And the really odd thing is, like, I don't even know how close the dates were. I don't. I had checked up some on James Dean's wreck, but I never actually paid any attention to the year. But it's crazy. Both cars were low to the ground sports cars. Both of them very fast cars. If I remember correctly, James Dean's car was a Spider. And like I said, Jan's was a Corvette. Both cars really ruined. One car killed a man. The other car could have, should have. It's amazing that Jan had even lived at all. Seriously. Now, I don't know exactly what is true, but I heard that he had more or less hooked back up with one of the Beach Boys and started doing illegal drugs. Now, I don't know how true that is. Someone said they've got documents on it. I don't know. But either way it goes, I understand, like, where Jan was already messed up mentally. The guy that was doing the drugs with him ended up becoming messed up because of the drugs. So, how true that is, I have no idea. But just to list a few of the songs that they sang. It was Surf City, Dead Man's Curve, Little Old Lady from Pasadena, and there's many more, many more. Now the really, really crazy thing, like there's one song, I had looked it up last night, Drag City. Okay, so that was on the album that Mom had, along with the Little Old Lady from Pasadena and Dead Man's Curve. Now this is the really crazy thing. Mom had a really beautiful floor model cabinet Zenith stereo. It had the record deck, radio, and 8-track. It had a wonderful sound system already. Beautiful cabinet too. And then Mom had Allegro speakers hooked up to that Zenith stereo. And the sound system that Mom had was so awesome. Now the song Drag City starts out with a revving car that screeches, and you can hear it take off in the beginning before they start singing. So Mom and Dad was so proud of how good that sound system was. So anybody who would visit the house and didn't know about it, they would say, "We want you to hear this." So they would put the record on, and they would put it on Drag City. And the sound system was so realistic and marvelous that it literally sounded like a car was in the back of the house, revving its engine and spinning off through the house, running out to the kitchen. Literally. The sound system was that awesome because you could hear it in one speaker, and then as the car was speeding off, you could hear it transfer from that one speaker to the next, to the next, to the next speaker. And it went through the entire house like a real car dragging through the hallway. It was so real. And to this day, I can still hear that in my memory. I can still hear how real that sounded in my memory. Now that says a lot about the stereo, but it also says a lot about the record. It was a good record. Anyway, so yeah, it is very sad what had happened to Jan. They had made a movie, and it's called Dead Man's Curve. And it gives you a generalization of how their career went and the accident. But I was reading through the comments, and there were some people who had actually known Jan and Dean, or at least knew Jan. And the way the movie portrayed it, Jan more or less was bossy and kind of high and mighty, rode a high horse like. But according to one who had left a comment, she said that she was in college with him when they was taking medical. And this wasn't in pre-med. This was the real deal before he would have gotten into house. And she said he was quiet and a good student. So I'm taking it that Jan wasn't as much as the movie portrayed him to be, as far as it went attitude-wise, but I don't know. I don't know. All I know is he wanted to have a singing career. He enjoyed singing. He enjoyed pleasing the fans. And Dean stuck right by him the majority of the time, except for when he couldn't, you know. So that is tonight's story. I was going to give out shout outs, but as I had said before, it's good to always check under the comments on the community to see if there's any spam. And it's always good to kind of look through the published comments as well, because I am discovering that some of the comments that should have been under my videos aren't there, but yet they're not under the spam. So I found one who had said that they got penalized for 60 days and are not allowed to do any live streaming because they was giving out shout outs, supposedly free shout outs. In other words, just choosing people to give shout outs for. And they ended up losing even 500 supporters over that. So I'm not going to be doing shout outs anymore. Not the way that I was doing. Okay? Because I had like I have 5 listed here that I was actually going to give a shout out for. So there goes that. YouTube's making it a little difficult for us to stand by one another and help each other out, help each other grow. But that's okay. All we got to do is keep putting out content, good quality content, and we not stop. We not stop. We just keep putting it out there, and people will find us. People will find us. So I'm sorry that I'm not going to be giving any shout outs for you guys. I'm so very sorry. I don't want anybody getting in trouble, not me or anyone else, you know. So, but I will be with yous with another story in a couple days. I'm actually enjoying doing this because I like digging and finding out more facts. I love doing that. I like doing that. So, yeah. I don't know what the next story will be, but we'll find out. So, I love every one of yous. Have a wonderful night.